Terence Crawford fans love to live off of his accomplishments at 140. They'll talk about what he did at 140. They'll talk about what he did at 135. But the fact, remember, no cap, just facts. The fact remains that he currently campaigns at 147 pounds. Him acting like he's the man at the division would be like Usyk walking around the heavyweight division talking all this smack like he's the god. But Usyk doesn't do that. Usyk knows in the grand scheme of things, he just beat Chisora. That just got him past the gate. That didn't make him the elite. That didn't make him the upper echelon. And Usyk doesn't walk around that way. He wants the challenge to fight Anthony Joshua, and I respect that. Yes, he cleaned out the cruiserweight division, but cruiserweight is cruiserweight, and heavyweight is heavyweight. Terence Crawford cleared out the junior welterweight division, but you notice that word junior in the welterweight? Right? Junior welterweight. Welterweight is just called welterweight. Let me tell you something about sports if you don't know how it works, right? I never played junior varsity in my life. Never. JV? Everybody knows junior means that you are a cut below. It's not bad to be a junior. It's not bad to be a junior, not at all. But when you're junior, that means that there's a senior. And that means senior is above. Right? So, when you're a junior welterweight, whatever you've done at junior welterweight is cute. But when you come to welterweight, now you're in the big leagues. Stop living off of what this man has done at junior welterweight because your junior varsity stats don't transfer to your stats once you play varsity. Whatever points you scored, it don't matter. Once you go nobody cares. So welcome to the welterweight division. Terence Crawford and all you Terence Crawford fanboys, here is Terence Crawford's resume at the welterweight division. Are you impressed? I'm not, and I'm going to tell you why. I am going to tell you why. Terence Crawford became the WBO welterweight champion by beating Jeff Horn. But those who know. What's up?
Listen, congratulations, great effort. I thought you lost, but great effort. I thought this guy was landing the punches. You were throwing a lot that were missing, but you showed great heart. The heart of a champion, no doubt about that. The character of a champion. But let me ask you, you fought an honest fight. So I'm going to take for granted you're an honest guy. And I'm going to ask you, do you feel after that ninth round, a very difficult round, after that round where it was almost stopped, I mean, you heard the words of the ref. He said, I'm going to stop this fight if you don't do something. And your own corner told you that. Do you really think that you were winning that fight?
Look, I thought I was winning the fight at that stage, yes. I thought I was outpointing him. I thought I was coming forward more and landing the cleaner blows. That's just my opinion. I respect your opinion too, of course, Teddy.
So they shoplifted the title from Manny Pacquiao and gave it to Jeff Horn. You know who else believes that the title was shoplifted from Manny Pacquiao? It will shock you. I'm telling you, it's going to be an absolute shocker.
You saw Horn, come on, the next 2 rounds, might have stole the next 2 rounds in this fight. He put up a great fight. I don't think he won the fight. Honestly, I don't think he won the fight, but I can tell you that he did enough in there to make it look, like he won.
So immediately after admitting that he doesn't believe that Jeff Horn defeated Manny Pacquiao, Timothy Bradley jumps out of the window for Jeff Horn immediately because he's a company man. He's a top-ranked man through and through. And Jeff Horn just beat Manny Pacquiao. So, of course, you know what that means. Jeff Horn is now better than every fighter on PBC's roster.
The 5-time champion, Timothy Bradley. I got to get at you with one more thing you just said. He could beat anybody in the division. I don't think he would beat Errol Spence Jr. I don't think that he would beat Keith Thurman. I don't think he would beat Danny Garcia. I don't see that happening.
I think he can compete with all of them. Honestly, I honestly think that this young guy can compete with all of them. He took Manny Pacquiao's best shot. He survived almost a KO round in the ninth. You know, he applied pressure to Manny Pacquiao, which we don't see from anybody, not including myself. You know, you didn't see Mayweather fight him the way this kid fought him. You know, I think he's tough for anybody in the welterweight division, honestly, with 17 fights.
Okay. All right.
So can we all take a moment to acknowledge, no cap, just facts. Timothy Bradley admits he doesn't believe that Jeff Horn beat Manny Pacquiao. He believed that Manny Pacquiao should have won the fight and still should have been the WBO champion. So with that in mind, why would it be so impressive for Terence Crawford to beat someone who was handed the title, who was gifted the title? Wouldn't that have made Jeff Horn a paper champion, right? So Terence Crawford goes in there and he beats the paper champion. In essence, wouldn't that be what he was supposed to do if he's a good fighter? Like, shouldn't a real fighter, a good fighter, a talented fighter beat a paper champion? Isn't that the case? So why is there so much fanfare and, you know, building it up as some great victory when in fact most people feel like Jeff Horn lost to Manny Pacquiao and he was a paper champion from the jump? The reason why this is so relevant is once Terence Crawford beats the paper champion Jeff Horn and mediocre talent, this is what you hear from Timothy Bradley.
I have to say this, man. Terence Crawford right now is the best fighter that I have seen in recent years, in past years. He's a throwback fighter. I'm talking about back with Sugar Ray Leonard. I'm talking about back with Sugar Ray Robinson. I'm talking about, you know, Mayweather. I'm talking about all the top guys that came before us. Terence Crawford, to me, is in that category. He can fight off the back foot. He can fight off the front foot. The guy can fight from southpaw position like he is a natural southpaw, but he's really not. He's actually a right-hander. You know, there's nothing that Terence Crawford can't do. And also, Max, you know, he's mean. He's mean like a Pernell Whitaker. He wants to knock you out. He wants to inflict pain into his opponents. And I feel that this upcoming fight, I think he's going to be able to display that once again, why he's the best fighter on the planet. Well, money have him there. I don't, because he hasn't had a chance to prove it yet, because none of these guys want to face him. I'm just going to say it. These guys don't want to face him.
When you say Kavaliauskas could catch him, Mean Machine could catch him what? Not in the ring with a punch. So he barely got through Ray Robinson, and I'm not talking Sugar Ray Robinson. That was a draw, and it could have gone the other way. Ray Robinson is a difficult opponent now, Max. He's a solid guy. He's difficult. He's awkward. No, he's awkward. You know, he's long. He's a southpaw. He's very awkward. Okay, he's a good fighter. I'm not saying he's not. Ray Robinson. Mm-hmm. But he's not Terence Crawford. I get that. He's not Terence Crawford, and Terence Crawford, no one does southpaw better than him. You know, by the way, you mentioned a throwback you mentioned a throwback. Yeah. The throwback is to Marvin Hagler. Terence Crawford is the best switch hitter since Marvin Hagler. The best switcher. Absolutely. And I think he might even be better than Marvin Hagler in that fashion. Seriously. At switching, yes. Better than Marvin Hagler. And you know, and let me tell you one more thing, man, Max. Seriously. If I could take a prime Terence Crawford, this is how much I believe in this kid, and a prime Floyd Mayweather, with all the tools that Terence Crawford has, I will pick Terence Crawford to beat a prime Mayweather any day of the week. Because of the skill set, Max. I love Terence Crawford. I disagree with that, Max, because I think Floyd at his best. Because I think Floyd at his best was a better defensive fighter than Crawford. Crawford's a better offensive fighter, but in those kind of matchups, I think defense usually beats the offense. I don't. Because Terence Crawford got more to bring. He got more to bring to the table. He's a great fighter. Floyd Mayweather got the little shoulder roll. I get it. Controls distance. But Terence Crawford is also a master at distance. Terence Crawford has punching power to hurt Floyd Mayweather. We saw that in the Zab Judah fight now. Yeah, Shane too. Shane hurt him with the right hand. Shane did hurt him as well. Yep. And did he fight Shane? But did Floyd fight Shane in his prime? Do you think he fought him in his prime? No. Exactly. And
the level of blasphemy within that clip is so ridiculous, I could spend hours talking about it. However, this video is already long enough. But you know what? I figured I'm going to let him have it. So let me point out one quick thing if you didn't notice. You notice how the standard changed once they started talking about Floyd? Once they started talking about Floyd, they were very critical. He was hurt. He was hurt against this guy. They don't bring up the fact that Terence Crawford was hurt against Gamboa. And you see how Max dismisses the fact that Cal Velasquez may actually be able to hurt Terence Crawford. Oh, foregone conclusion. Like, it was like a joke to Max. Remember that. So, during the time of this interview, Terence Crawford had been hurt by Gamboa, a little guy, and they don't even bring that up. It's like Terence Crawford can't get hurt. He can't get hurt. And then when Floyd Mayweather beat Shane Mosley, they highlight that it wasn't in Shane Mosley's prime. But you just saw Terence Crawford dismantle Kell Brook. Lose 3 rounds to Kell Brook. Kell the Shell. Lose 3 rounds, and no one brings up the fact that Kell wasn't in his prime. He didn't beat a prime Kell. How can you beat a prime Kell? You see how when they're critiquing a fighter who's not ESPN, who's not Top Rank, they're very critical and nitpicky. But they forgive and overlook a lot when it comes to their guys. Look at how they are bloviating about Terence Crawford. In the class with Ray Leonard will beat Floyd in his prime. A better switch fighter than Marvelous Marvin Hagler. And I'm from Boston, and I learned how to train in Brockton. I learned how to fight from the great Goody Petronelli who trained Marvelous Marvin Hagler. Do you not understand how disrespectful that is to me? Shout out to Brockton, Massachusetts.
Would you fight Crawford?
I fight anybody. Like I said before, I'm in this sport to fight the best and make money.
Right.
At the end of the day, I'm in this sport to fight the best and make money. This is what I do. Like, I already fought him for free in amateurs. So, show me the money. If you pound for pound, show me the money. Let's get this popping. But
so you don't believe that across the street stuff that he's with Top Rank and you with PBC?
If the fight makes enough money, if the fight makes enough sense, it's just like Manny Pacquiao and Mayweather. They was once Top Rank, one was Premier Boxing. You feel me? And they made it happen because why? It makes sense. A lot of money. But if it don't make to split it against 2 fighters, it probably won't make a lot of sense unless it's generating a lot of money. And I know I'm gonna bring my money. I know I'm gonna generate my money from my side. So it's all about. At the end of the day, that's more than just fighters. From I could sit up here and say anything to you, but that's big. That's more than boxing. That's politics.
Business.
Yeah, that's politics. That's something I can't control. Any fighter come up here and say whatever, blah blah blah. Tim Bradley could say come across the pond and all this dumb shit. Bro, you know the game. No. You know the game. You never fought nobody outside of Top Rank, so obviously it wasn't enough money for you to cross over either.
Now it was rumored that there was lowball offers sent to you opposed to giving you what Amir Khan was offered.
What was Amir Khan offered? What did he get?
They said anyone 5 to 7 while you were rooming to get 3.
Bro, how you get 5 to 7 million and I already beat him in his prime?
True that.
And I heard somebody told me they offered like 3 million. Bro, I made $3 million to fight Ross Salga.
Right. Bob you said 3 million?
Yeah. I made a lot more than people think. Trust me. Don't believe everything you see.
So hindsight's 2020. When you look back and you hear, "Oh, we offered Danny Garcia $4 million," you may say to yourself, "That's a good deal." But how would you pay Amir Khan 5 to 7 million, but then offer Danny 4? When Danny beat Amir Khan in his prime, Danny generates good numbers, better viewership numbers than Amir Khan, better viewership numbers than Terence Crawford. How are you going to offer him less than Amir Khan? 1. 2, Danny Garcia was making around that amount of money to fight opponents that were easier than Terence Crawford. And let's be real. People who want to sit there and say like, "Oh, just take the money. Oh, fight Terence Crawford." Riddle me this. Why are you not telling Terence Crawford to take the 60-40 split against Earl Spence then? See, this is what I mean about keep the same energy. I kept hearing how, oh, Danny's a punk. He won't take the $4 million. Danny didn't take the $4 million because he felt like he was worth more. And if you paid Amir Khan $5 million to fight Terence Crawford, then Danny is worth more because he beat Amir Khan. And he has better viewership numbers than Amir Khan. And he has better viewership numbers than Terence Crawford. See, this is what we're getting at. But, oh, Danny's a chump because he didn't take the $4 million offer. So, okay, then, what is Terence Crawford for not taking a 60-40 with Errol Spence? When you can't lie anymore because no cap's just facts, it's dead already. We've seen the numbers. We know the numbers now. So, knowing the numbers and knowing that Bob Arum is running around telling anyone who would listen that Terence Crawford is a bad investment, telling everyone he's lost so much money on Terence Crawford. If I'm Danny Garcia and I'm Errol Spence and I'm looking to make a fight to generate money for my family and make top dollars for the risk that I am going to take, I'm Danny Garcia. I look at Errol Spence and I see, man, this dude is coming off 2 consecutive pay-per-view showings where he sold over 300,000 pay-per-view buys. If I'm Errol Spence and I'm looking at Danny Garcia, I'm saying, yo, this dude, when he fights on network television, always breaks over $1 million. One fight had 5.1 million. When he fights on premium cable, he does good numbers. He's an exciting fighter. He has a fan base that supports him. What fight would you take? His own promoter, Terence Crawford's own promoter, is operating at a loss, and that's why you hear Danny Garcia making the statements that he made. I know I'll bring in my side. When you make a fight, it is not just, oh, I'm taking, but it's also you're trusting everyone to do their part. What is Bob Arum's biggest critique against Terence Crawford? He's bad at self-promotion. I put him in the positions to shine, and he just doesn't do it. He's playing video games and talking. Look, you can say what you want, right? But just know you're a hypocrite. If you don't force Terence Crawford to take the 60-40, but you were mad at Danny for pointing out that he was worth more than 4. Because in essence, all Terence Crawford is claiming is that he's worth more than a 40% split. And Danny was doing the same when he said that he was worth more than that $4 million. So you got to be fair across the board. It's okay to be a company man. I feel like most people are company men and women. However, you don't have to overdo it. You don't have to oversell it. You can still promote your company. You can still do your job and be realistic at the same time. People understand what's up. Take Andre Ward, for example. I understand Andre Ward has to promote ESPN fighters. He has to do his thing for those that are affiliated with ESPN. I get that. But you can do that without bashing other people.
You know, first of all, you got to show love and respect to Errol Spence. Even if he hadn't had the accident, for him to go, you know, straight to Danny Garcia is nobody to play with.
Right.
You know, people just talk about, you know, the hook and the power. Danny Garcia can fight, and he has a boxing IQ, and people don't talk about that. But if you add on, you know, the trauma that Spence went through and the wreck that everybody saw, and then he comes right back and faces that guy, that's a throwback kind of mentality, man. And you got to respect that. In terms of the fight itself, it's going to be interesting, man, because I don't know what style Danny's going to fight. It's going to be interesting to see how Spence looks. So I really don't have a prediction or a take on it. I'm going to be sitting back watching that as a fan.
Terence Crawford's next fight at the welterweight division was against Jose Benavidez Jr. And, well, let's dive in. Jose Benavidez Jr. was shot in the leg in August 2016. He fought 2 confidence builders before facing Terence Crawford, including the 22-0 Frank Rojas. Rojas' resume was the stuff of fluff. He had the majority of his fights in Venezuela against fighters with losing records. On paper, Rojas' 22-0 record with 21 knockouts was enough to sell the casual on the idea that Jose Benavidez was back and fully recovered from his gunshot wound. But during the fight, it was evident that Benavidez was not the same fighter. Benavidez never fought again after the Crawford fight. Crawford fans will say Crawford retired him, but there is evidence to suggest otherwise. In an article from Boxing Scene titled Jose Benavidez's leg will be 80% at best, father says. Jose Benavidez Jr. had to pull out of his August fight against Luis Collazo after suffering a leg injury. In August 2016, Benavidez Jr. was shot in the right leg, just above the knee, and the bullet hit a main artery. He also suffered a wound to his left leg, and the injury sustained from the near-fatal night will linger for the rest of his life. Whenever Benavidez Jr. steps in the ring, he'll forever do so with a physical disadvantage, according to his father. He injured his leg a little bit before the scheduled Collazo fight. And if something is wrong already, I'm not going to take a chance. I have to make sure he's fully healthy before he's ready to go again. Father and trainer Jose Benavidez Sr. told BoxingScene.com. I don't think he's 100%. He'll never be 100% recovered. If we can get to at least 80%, that will be good, and I will be happy with that. When he fought Terence Crawford, his leg was 60 to 70%. So Jose Benavidez Jr. had to pull out with a fight he was going to have with Luis Collazo because of a leg injury, and it was then his dad admitted that he was never going to be the same. Jose Benavidez Jr. has not fought since his fight with Terence Crawford. And look at the level of competition he fought before he fought Terence Crawford. You mean to tell me that if Benavidez was primed and ready to go and they knew it, he would have fought someone like Rojas, a man who had a record of 22-0, 21 wins coming by way of knockout. But when you dissect the record, he was fighting people who had less than 10 fights. And even still, they had more losses than they did wins. Why would they throw Benavidez in with someone like that if they really believed that he was ready to go? I'm telling you, the evidence is before you. It was a cash out. And they knew Benavidez was not the same going into that fight. So, people say that Kell Brook was the best Kell Brook because he stepped on a scale, right? So somehow that's credible. What's more credible than the trainer telling you the fighter's not the same? The trainer pulling a fighter out of the fight. The trainer telling you that my fighter is not going to fight unless he can get to at least 80%. And the trainer not allowing the fighter to ever fight again. Oh yeah, and by the way, the trainer just happens to be the fighter's father that he is named after. So think about that. The next fighter on Terence Crawford's welterweight resume is Amir Khan. What can I say about Amir Khan that you don't already know? In the legal profession, there's this thing called res ipsa loquitur. What res ipsa loquitur means is the thing speaks for itself. So say hypothetically you walked into a grocery store, you slip and fell, you put your hand on the ground, you feel that it's wet. It's evident what happened. You slip and fell because you walked on a wet surface. It speaks for itself. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you res ipsa loquitur.
What a shot! And he saw another huge left! Amir Khan throwing a right-hand punch, getting caught with a left hook, and he didn't do anything wrong. This is just what happens in boxing when you have flashy changes.
That's where Garcia's dangerous.
Oh, it certainly is.
The next welterweight fight on Terence Crawford's resume was Kavaliauskas, also known as the Mean Machine. Now, when Kavaliauskas fought TC, he was coming off of a majority draw that many people felt like he lost. He had fought Ray Robinson, and it was ruled a majority draw. Now, fun fact, that fight was for the NABF welterweight title. I guess TC really did want to unify after all. Kavaliauskas dropped Terence Crawford in that fight.
I get knocked down, but I get up again. You're never gonna keep me down. I get knocked down, but I get up again. You're never gonna keep me down. I get knocked down, but I get up again.
the powers that be did not rule it a knockdown. Remember, Max Kellerman thought it was a foregone conclusion, made a joke about it, couldn't foresee, even entertain the thought of Kavaliauskas dropping Terence Crawford.
Hit him with a right hand and knocked him down. Clean knockdown. And at that point, I had Kavaliauskas up 2-1 with a knockdown. That was that. But Crawford got up off the deck and stubbornly wasn't even going to change out of his southpaw stance where he was getting hit with the right hand. He was showing him, yep, I'm going to stay doing just this exact thing and beat you up and knock you out, which he did.
After that knockdown, was there any thought in your mind that blood was really hurt?
Yeah, I thought he got buzzed again a couple times after that.
Now, if the fight between Kavaliauskas and Ray Robertson was a draw, my question is, how did Terence Crawford choose his opponent? Why did he choose Kavaliauskas over Ray Robertson? Especially when Ray Robertson called him out as soon as he found out Terence Crawford was moving up to 147.
I fought Terence Crawford in the U.S. Championship. I beat him there. We got out the ring. Him and his whole family was trying to fight me afterwards.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy. That's real.
What do you think about him coming up to 47?
Listen, man. I introduced him to the weight class. Simple, man. I introduced him to the 147. Like I told you before, man, I'm not taking no picks, man. I fight whoever.
Does he have an Achilles heel? A lot of people think that, he's the next thing popping. Is there something that he hasn't faced that you've seen early on in his career or in the amateurs?
Listen, man, you gotta show respect. He did his thing at 140. Right. But this is a whole different weight class from 147. You know what I'm saying? There's some big boys up here, and I feel like he can't just jump from 140 to 147 and fight for a world title. I feel like he should prove himself. And if you want to fight someone like me, to fight me, I'm willing to take that.
Ray Robertson said he wanted that fight. Ray Robertson has been chasing that fight. And Ray Robertson is confident he can beat Terence Crawford because he beat him in the amateurs. So my question is, if Ray Robertson and Kavaliauskas fought to a draw, and you're going to pick a fighter, why'd you pick Kavaliauskas? 1. And 2, what kind of person picks a fighter coming off a draw as their next opponent? Can you imagine what the people would be saying if Errol Spence did that? Errol Spence is coming off of a life-altering car accident, and some people are still giving him slack for selecting Danny Garcia. We'll call this portion of Terence Crawford's resume Deontay Wilder's playbook. In this fight against Kell Brook, Terence Crawford carefully selected a larger opponent that would give him the buzz that he needed. That man was Kell the Shell Brook. Kell Brook, the man who moved up 2 weight classes from 147 pounds to 160 pounds to challenge Triple G at a time when Triple G was being hyped up as the most dangerous man in boxing, the big drama show. And that's exactly what we got when we saw Triple G beat Kell Brook so bad that he broke his right eye socket. Kell Brook, with a lot of heart, still wanted to defend his IBF title and went back down to welterweight to face one of the most dangerous fighters in the welterweight division at that time, Errol Spence Jr. And Errol Spence gave Kell Brook a beating and broke his left eye socket. But I'm happy we're doing this today because we're going to dispel a lot of the rumors and some of the gossip you hear. But this time you're going to hear and see. And so, therefore, there should be no more misrepresentation of facts because there will be irrefutable evidence to prove it wrong from this point forward. It has been represented that Kell Brook had the fight beat out of him against Triple G, but is that what you see? He's still throwing punches. Dominic Ingles waving the towel. The ref doesn't even notice it. Kell Brook is still in there. And then Ingle throws the towel. And then Brook looks at Ingle like, what are you doing? And then you see Ingle points at like his eye. Letting Kell know, I stopped the fight because of your eye. Please tell me where in that sequence did you see Kell Brook quit? Please tell me where in that sequence did you see the fight get beat out of Kell? Because I didn't see it. Yeah, he was getting beaten, but there's a difference between getting beat up and having the fight beat out of you. Even as a kid, I remember when I used to fight my older cousins and older people. They would beat me up. I'd get up and be like, where you going? We're going back again. We keep fighting. They'd just give up. They'd be like, look, we're sick of beating on you. Yeah, I got beat up, but I didn't get the fight beat out of me. Kell Brook got beat up in the Triple G fight, absolutely. But he did not have the fight beat out of him. That is a misnomer. Now, when Spence fought Brook, as you can see, Spence has him on the ropes. He's unloading. He's backpedaling. Kell Brook's backpedaling, and he's getting beat. And now you see him walk away. Spence is on the attack, and then he takes a knee. Spence is the one that broke his will. Now, pay attention when they show Kell. It's his left eye that's damaged, not his right eye. Look at his right eye. His right eye looks normal. It's his left eye that's damaged. And that's a key distinction because Triple G broke Kell Brook's right eye socket. And it was Errol Spence Jr. who broke the left eye socket. A completely different injury. And Kell Brook took that knee and gave in because of the damage Spence had done to his left eye. He quit because of the damage that was done to his left eye. So, that Spence beat the fight out of Kell Brook. It was the injuries that Errol Spence Jr. inflicted upon Kell Brook that made him take a knee. He did not take a knee against Triple G. He did not have the fight beat out of him against Triple G. He was still there. He still had fight in him. He was just getting beat up. Against Errol Spence Jr., he quit. You saw it. He walked away. The referee said, okay, fight. Earl went to attack, and then he took a knee. And that's when the referee stopped it. And another thing is, you notice Kell Brook didn't dispute the stoppage. In the Triple G fight, he did. He disputed the stoppage, and Dominic Ingle pointed to his eye to suggest, I stopped the fight because of your eye. So come on, man. If you're going to tell some stories, tell the truth. Errol Spence beat the fight out of Kell Brook, and he made Kell Brook quit. Nothing was wrong with the right eye from the Triple G fight in the fight with Errol Spence Jr. You just saw it. But it still didn't stop you from discrediting Errol Spence when he beat Kell Brook. But somehow, 3 years after that, Terence Crawford had a better win. After 3 easy touches at 154 and making weight at 147 pounds for the first time in 3 years, TC fans started to push the narrative that a 34-year-old Kell Brook with metal in both of his eye sockets from massive beatings, fighting at his lowest weight in 3 years, was better against TC than he was in his prime. Cap. Straight cap. No facts. You're gonna have to give me something. The only problem is Dominic Ingle, the man who trained Kell Brook for most of his career, did not train him for this fight. Chose not to train Kell Brook for this fight. Dominic Ingle, Kell Brook's former trainer, was quoted as saying this: I think Kell Brook could beat Terence Crawford, but he'd have to have the best camp of his life and make the weight the best he could. He'd have to have the team behind him. He seems to be doing that himself, which isn't a good place to be going into America. You need somebody to be around you that has experience, no matter how much the fighter knows. The fighter doesn't want to be concentrating on anything else other than fighting. I don't know who is training him. We haven't fallen out. We're never going to fall out. He does his own thing. Like I said, he's 34. He has 3 kids. He's made his money. We've had a good run, said Ingle. No cap, just facts. Dominic Ingle, Kell Brook's former trainer, said basically Kell Brook seems to be training himself, which isn't a good thing, especially when you're going into America and you need someone with experience. You need someone around you who knows the sport, even if you're an experienced fighter. And he also said that Kell Brook has made his money. And then he finished it off with, "We've had a good run." Now you have to think about that. Seriously, he's made his money? What does that mean? He's made his money. That's saying it's it, brother. We've had a good run. Means that the run is over. That's a concession. So here Kell Brook comes to America where he's fighting Terence Crawford in a fight he negotiated himself, in a fight he basically trained himself for, and a fight he had to get put on the networks by himself. All these things this guy's doing on his own because most of the people around him are conceding that Special K isn't special anymore. The man they once called Special K, to quote the TBE, Ned the cameraman, is currently okay. But somehow, the Terence Crawford fans took okay and made him better than when he was Special K. I can't understand for the life of me how they can honestly believe that makes sense. Especially given the circumstances surrounding Kell Brook going into the fight. I must admit, it was sad to see the best version of Kell Brook get rocked by a jab. It's laughable. TC fans try to argue it's a right hook, and Kell Brook fans try to argue it's a right hook. Well, if it was a right hook, it was the shortest right hook I've ever seen. It's probably the shortest you can throw a hook for it to count as a hook. You be the judge. Was this a jab or a right hook? Now watch. TC just do a jab. And he throws the same identical punch. So unless you're telling me the punch he threw first was a hook, then hey, so be it. Then he just throws some seriously short hooks. But what I believe I saw was Kell Brook get rocked by a jab. And that's the man that people are arguing is better at 34 years old, the lightest weight he's ever been at in 3 years, than he was in his prime. Hey, more power to you. Terence Crawford's welterweight resume is mediocre at best. When I look at Terence Crawford's resume, it looks like the type of opposition you throw an up-and-coming fighter in with. Seriously, it's like this should be the map for Jaron Ennis to become a household name. They should throw him in there with Horn, then Khan, then Velasquez, and then Kell Brook. And then Jaron Boots Ennis will become a household name. But it doesn't look like the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world. It certainly doesn't look like the best fighter at welterweight. When you have someone in the division who's unified champion and unified beating Kell Brook 3 years ago. I don't want to hear that an athlete at the age of 34 is better 3 years later. That's a joke. That's a joke. It's like scientifically impossible. Please, in the comment section, name me one athlete who was better at 34 than he was at 31. And don't even try to name LeBron James because he's not a better athlete. He has a higher IQ. Now, if you wanted to argue that Kell Brook had a higher boxing IQ than he did 3 years ago, I could entertain that. But to say he's better, LeBron James will tell you right now he's not better than he was in 2012. Bob Arum had to make Terence Crawford the number one pound-for-pound fighter. I'm sure he probably wanted to put someone else in that position. But he's lost so much money on Terence Crawford, he's ready to cash out. He's sick of losing money on Terence Crawford, and it is time to cash out. That is why Bob wants the Spence fight. The Spence fight is the fight that can guarantee he will not take another loss. He's done taking losses on Terence Crawford, and he knows that Terence Crawford versus Earl Spence is the fight that will sell because it's the fight the public wants. He's not even confident in Terence Crawford versus Manny Pacquiao. He's not confident in that. Not to say he doesn't believe Terence Crawford could win that fight. He's not confident the public buys that fight. And the reason why he's not confident the public will buy that fight is because of Manny Pacquiao's age and the mileage on Manny Pacquiao's body. Manny Pacquiao has been in so many great wars and has given so much to the sport of boxing. Most people don't want to see him fight anymore. Not to say they're not entertained or they won't tune in, but they feel like, Manny, you are solidified. You are a first ballot Hall of Famer. There's nothing you need to do. And also, he's old. He's old. People want to see Terence Crawford in there with a young lion in their prime, and not one of these manufactured people who you're trying to tell me was the man, but he was fighting for the NABATACA belt, the alphabet soup belt. No, they want to see him in with a real fighter. That's why Bob Arum is calling for the Errol Spence fight. But some shift has changed, and Terence Crawford no longer wants to fight. The man who was so confident backstage at an event that he could beat Errol Spence is now rejecting offers of 60-40 split. A 60-40 split to a man who in 2 fights sold 200,000 pay-per-view buys. A man who was fighting on network television in his last fight, and he's thought to be the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. What does it say if you're supposed to be the best in your sport, but there are other people in your sport that fight on pay-per-view? That you can be the best, but you don't make no money. And that's what Bob Arum was saying. I can have the greatest opera singer in the world, but if they can't sell no tickets, then what's the point? If you can have the number 1 pound-for-pound accolades and all those things, but if you can't sell, if you can't generate revenue, you are bad for business. That's the point. Earl giving you 60-40 is generous based on your history in pay-per-view numbers, your history in network numbers, your history at the gate, your level of opposition at welterweight is generous. But even if you don't think it's generous, make a counteroffer. Why just say the fight's never going to happen? Bob Arum is ready to cash out on TC. How do I know that? Because he said it himself. I'm done taking losses on Terence Crawford. He's done taking losses. That's the very definition of I am ready to cash out. That's why I am confident Bob Arum wants to make the Errol Spence fight now. And it's strange to me that now that I'm finally confident Bob Arum wants to make the Errol Spence fight, Terence Crawford is now running around saying he doesn't care if the fight ever happens. And it's never going to happen, is what he's saying. His tune has changed. The energy's different. Come on, man. You got to admit you could feel that. All cap, no facts. If the fight doesn't happen, it will be because of Terence Crawford. The proof is in the pudding. We now know Errol Spence sent him an offer. See, Terence Crawford ran up on Errol Spence backstage. Errol Spence actually sent him an offer. We now know it was a reasonable offer. Why? Because Terence Crawford is a financial liability to his promoter. Terence Crawford has cost his promoter so much money, his promoter could have built a house in Beverly Hills. How do I know that? His promoter said that about him. And Terence Crawford isn't happy with his promoter either. He feels like he's had a lack of a marquee fight, and he wants a marquee fight. It just so happens Errol Spence would fill that bill for him. 60-40 split for a man who has sold basically over twice as many pay-per-view buys as you, who's generated way more viewership numbers than you, generated more gate, more revenue, is a fantastic investment for his promoter. Has other options, doesn't need you, can fight other people. If he doesn't fight you, he can fight Thurman. He can fight Pacquiao. If you're Pacquiao and you're looking for best return on investment, would you fight Terence Crawford or would you fight Errol Spence? Errol Spence, 2 pay-per-views in a row that sold over 300,000 pay-per-view buys. Errol Spence has sold more pay-per-views in each one of his fights individually than Terence Crawford has sold in his entire career. Terence Crawford says Errol Spence needs him. How? How? And this is what I'm getting at. We now know that Errol Spence is serious about making a fight because he sent an offer. That's what you do when you're serious about making a fight. And when you're serious about negotiating a fight, you send a counter offer. You don't just automatically announce to social media that the fight's off. But TC's been winning that way. He's been winning the battle of perception, so why not go to social media and try to continue to win the battle of perception? 60-40 is a fair offer, based on the fact that Errol Spence does better numbers, based on the fact that Terence Crawford, his resume at the welterweight division looks like he's an up-and-comer, that they're just now preparing to throw him in there for a title shot. He's fought mediocre talent. I broke it down. It's all facts, no cap. When all is said and done, there are 3 things I never, ever, ever want to hear from Terence Crawford fans again. 1 is that people are scared to fight him. He got a reasonable offer from Errol Spence, and he rejected, and he's saying the fight will never happen. Errol Spence is saying, oh, Terence Crawford's on my pound-for-pound list, and I hope to be undisputed soon. And send him an offer. Actions speak louder than words, okay? Action speaks louder than words. Another thing I don't want to hear from Terence Crawford fans is that he's the A side of any fight. His own promoter just put it out there that he's not. His own promoter just put it out there that he's bad for business. So come on now. How can you make the argument that, oh, he's the A side when his own promoter's telling you he's not? Dang. That's called the guillotine. That's called it's a wrap. That's called you have nothing to say. That's called zip it. And the last thing I don't want to hear from TC fans ever again, is that he has a better resume than Errol Spence. Because you guys are going to 140, you're going to 135, and even then his resume isn't better. But when you limit it strictly to the weight division he's in, welterweight, his resume is not impressive. All facts, no cap. All facts, no cap. You just saw the facts. Broke down each opponent and you saw the flaws and the weaknesses within them. You would not give anyone else, no other number 1 pound-for-pound fighter that break. I hear people complaining about Canelo Alvarez fighting Callum Smith. How can you ridicule and criticize Canelo Alvarez from fighting Callum Smith with his resume, with the resume that he has, champion in 5 different weight divisions, more than Terence Crawford, and still he gets criticized and ridiculed, but somehow every advantage and every benefit of the doubt seems to be given to TC. I think TC is a talented fighter. But if y'all really want to smoke, if Terence Crawford fans really want to smoke, tell your man to take the contract. Tell your man to accept the 60-40 split. All he needs to do is beat Errol Spence, and he would arguably he become a superstar. He'd become a superstar. But if he rejects this offer, if Terence Crawford rejects this offer and the fight never happens, I don't ever want to hear from TC fans that Errol ducked TC, because this video is proof. Irrefutable evidence.
The lie detector test determined that was a lie.
Wow!